随蝴蝶一起消散吧，就是的幻影。
该清算了。
妈，18万伤害才打到1/3呀！我怎么什么东西啊？能不能要不讲点道理呀？给大家看一下刚刚我那个希尔的面板啊，6加5，然后呢属性是这样一个样子的。我个人觉得算是一个非常非常不错的希尔了吧。
Hey guys, Mr. Pokey here, back with another video. Today, we'll be talking about the Swarm Disaster, which is the latest permanent endgame content implemented by miHoYo. Its difficulty at difficulty 5 is much harder compared to Memory of Chaos at level 10. So having a proper plan by utilizing the different buffs, blessings, curios will greatly improve the player's success, even if they lack well-invested units. On the other hand, even highly invested E6 S5 units can still get destroyed without the proper planning or if they do not make use of the buffs offered to them. So we will be exploring how CM players easily clear the Swarm Disaster, especially at difficulty 5. Alright, with that out of the way, let's get into today's content. While today's content will be on Swarm Disaster, under the assumption that it is at its highest difficulty, the principles can still be applied to all previous difficulties. We will not be covering units at teams that requires extremely high investments, such as high Eidolons and multiple 5 stars. There are infinite possibilities for players to clear difficulty 5, but we will be taking the path of least resistance so that players can clear the entire Swarm Disaster event as soon as possible. And lastly, the path of propagation will be explored in a separate video because this particular path is only unlocked once you unlock everything else, right? So that is gonna be that for the future. So just a quick summary before we continue, there are plenty of resources and content online that teaches players how do they go about doing Swarm Disaster, but I'll just quickly recap some of the key points. For difficulty 5, you will be encountering level 95 enemies. The higher the enemies levels are, the more damage you're gonna deal and the less damage you're gonna receive because of the damage formula, right? The difference between enemies level is gonna directly correlate to the level of your own units. Secondly, there is a separate progression and skill tree from the normal simulated universe through the Communing Trail or the Trail of Path Strider. Right, so for this, kindly refer to Prydwen. They have an excellent amount of resources that can teach you exactly what kind of buffs you can get from the Communing Trail. And furthermore, on top of the standard blessings and curios, different paths also have different effects on the boards and domains. So this is going to be strictly for Swarm Disaster. And once again, I like to refer you guys to Prydwen, where they listed out exactly what sort of dimension effect, what sort of continuous effect that each path has. And lastly, there's also interplay, which is essentially if you get 3 blessings from one path and you get 3 blessings from another path, you can get a bonus effect that's added to your path resonance. Note that the secondary pick, it is tied to the initial path, right? So for example, if you are using destruction, you can only have interplay with preservation as well as elation, right? You can't have 3+3 for every other path, so there is a limited number. Now let's move on to some general tips that can apply to any players and any team comps, right? Number 1, the more you do Swarm Disaster, the easier it gets. So new players are advised to repeat lower difficulties before attempting higher difficulties, right? That being said, some of the challenges in the Trail of Path Strider does require players to have a difficulty 3 minimum, otherwise it will not count towards the progression. So keep that in mind. But the more you do, the more buffs you get out of all the different paths. So it's definitely going to make your life a lot easier once you keep grinding Swarm Disaster, even if you cannot clear difficulty 5 at the current moment. Secondly, sustains are far more important than DPS. It doesn't matter if your DPS is E6 S5, it doesn't matter if they can deal like 100,000, 300, 1 million damage. It doesn't matter at all if they're gonna get one shot. And just to further add on a little bit, shielders are generally way more valuable than heals because at max HP, you can get one shot by the enemies, especially at difficulty 5. Fantastic. Okay, the heal doesn't matter. Honestly, it doesn't matter. It's fine. Whereas shielders, they can drastically increase your maximum health pool, right? And because of this, you are less likely to get one shot. So units like Japart, March 7, they're going to be super good when you're using them in Swarm Disaster. Right. Next, exceeding the countdown that you guys can see on the top left hand corner of your screen, it will buff enemies, but the buff provided to the enemies at stage 1 to 5 is still manageable. And if you guys are going to exceed these buffs because you got extra adventure, extra rewards, the buff you're playing are usually worth it. But that being said, try to stick to 5 turns maximum, because 6 onwards the buffs on the enemy is gonna get increasingly difficult, right? And I don't think that you would ever want to try to fight a boss at 20 stacks of this countdown, because that's gonna be really difficult. Lastly, and this is also applied to simulated universe as well, some blessings are extremely valuable even if they're not from the same path, right? For example, if you're going to be using abundance or preservation path, a lot of other blessings that you get, such as the 60% energy refund from Hunt, the killing blow negation from destruction, as well as the weakness break efficiency from nihility, they are all really good blessings to have even if they are not in the same path. So do keep this in mind. Just a slight note over here, using a destruction path can be very difficult at high levels because the destruction resonance, it places your units at low health, right? The whole gimmick with destruction is that the more damage your units take, then the more damage you're going to do. But for us, we can't afford to be in this low health category, especially if your units are not developed or you don't have the right blessings, because you're just going to get one shot. So I would not advise players to use destruction path for the most part. Secondly, and just a small note, if you guys are running the nihility path with Kafka or Sambu and Luca, do avoid the Cocolia boss at the second stage, because the Bronya with the Cocolia boss, it'll cleanse all debuffs, which includes duty. So just 2 little things to note. Now, here are some notes to look out for. You guys can see over here, adventure, reward, and elite are generally always the best note to go for. Reward is basically guaranteed rewards that's going to benefit your team. Adventure, you can get up to 1 curio, 1 blessing, and 150 cosmic fragments if I'm not wrong, if you're able to clear all the trotters or destroy all the destructible objects. And lastly, elite is always going to give you more buffs than compared to like the normal enemy stages. That being said, your team should be strong enough, because if your team can't defeat the elite, especially in the earlier stages when you're lacking all the buffs, then I would not advise you guys to go for elite. But it does come with very good blessings. Next, for the little trotters, like it could be blessing trotter or cure trotter, they're generally random and are really good if you can get them, but I wouldn't go out of my way just to get them, right? If they are like, if you guys are on the way to something and you guys see a trotter, maybe like 1 or 2 grids away, then I would advise you guys to go and get it. Next, respite and transactions basically is only meant if you guys want to spend your cosmic fragment. If you guys do not have enough cosmic fragments, then I would not go to these places. Next, the propagation things, like combat swarm and the current swarm, these are really good if you're using units that are good with propagation buffs, such as Imbibitor Lune, Qingque, or Blade. If not, then I would not go ahead and get these blessings. Lastly, they are not as valuable as trotters, but the enhanced and mutation beacons, they're generally pretty good to have as well. They're good to have, but I also wouldn't go out of my way to get them. And in fact, I do believe that they are not as valuable as trotters. Now, moving on, we have universal blessings, which pretty much every single team can make use of. You guys see over here some of the 3 stars, some of the 2 stars, as well as some of the 1 star over here. Do note that getting your own paths, the blessings from your own paths, they are always going to be a priority to unlock the upgrades for path resonance, because generally for most of the paths we see, getting all of the path upgrades is going to be super beneficial, right? For Hunt path, for abundance path, all these kind of paths, they're really good. But that being said, for some paths, you don't really need their maximum upgrades. So paths like preservation, paths like destruction, right? Some of the effects are really not that great, right? You don't really need the 14 buffs, and because of this, you guys can go for the different blessings, which should benefit your team even more, instead of focusing all onto a single path. Now finally, we'll move on to the CM player's easiest clear path to at least to clear to difficulty 5. We have abundance and preservation, and the name of the game here is basically sustain. You want your team to sustain and just outlive the enemies and just slowly chip away at their damage. You want to deal damage and you want to survive, right? All the other paths, I'm not saying that they're not as good, but these 2 paths, abundance and preservation, they're the only paths that really increase your survivability of your entire team, right? And especially for newer players, this is going to be very crucial if you guys are getting 1 shot left, right, and center, right? Now, we'll first talk about abundance path. Mercy is an absolutely insane dimension effect because it allows players to get significantly more nodes than any other path, resulting in more blessings, curios, and cosmic fragments. And I do believe that out of all the paths that we see, Mercy is the best dimension effect. So if you guys are going for abundance, you'll generally get a lot more blessings and a lot more effects that benefit your entire team compared to other paths that you get less buffs, right? At the end of the day, the development of your team is not I wouldn't say it's not important, but it is less important compared to getting more blessings and more cures and all that kind of stuff. So that's that. Next is that abundance has really high sustain because the blessings in this path increases HP percentage and healing percentage, which greatly improves the survivability for players with less developed teams. So like I said, we want to take the path of least resistance, right? We want to go ahead and clear to Swarm difficulty 5 as soon as possible. So abundance is going to allow players to get through that survivability issue. And lastly, and this point is shared with preservation as well, is that this path is really auto-friendly because considering that Swarm Disaster is the permanent content, it has rewards tied to its completion, such as Simulated Universe, right? You get credits from completing these paths. So we might potentially just farm Swarm Disasters for a really long time. So being auto-friendly will greatly increase the quality of life when we do Swarm Disaster in the future. I'm pretty sure we don't want to keep doing manual and just divest all our time into Swarm Disaster, right? So being auto-friendly is actually a really good point I want to make over here. So how exactly do we play Abundance path? The key blessings for Abundance is going to be Dewdrop. Dewdrop is an absolute must because without Dewdrop, the damage output would drastically fall off for Abundance. Other than that, path blessings that increase HP, healing, and Dewdrop charging efficiency will help us to survive even more as well as deal more damage. Because all of our damage, which comes from Dewdrop, comes from HP percentage and healing. And then for Abundance's support blessings, do refer to the previous slide for the full list of support blessings that can benefit, which basically any sort of path can use. But for Abundance, these are some of the paths you can use, right? Freeze, reducing damage taken by splitting amongst all allies, some action value, some speed, some energy, struck with a killing blow and you revive. Yeah, all these kind of stuff are just really universal. So try to get this if you can. And lastly, for recommended units, Blade is going to be our best in slot DPS, but other DPS work as well. It's just that Blade is the only one that scales with HP, right? And Abundance gives a lot of HP. So that's why I would recommend players to get Blade if you guys have it. Right? Other than that, any sustain that heals works. Luocha works, Bailu works, and Tasha works, but honestly, any of this works. And frankly speaking, Luocha isn't even that much better than the other two because we are unlikely to face skill point issues because most of the time where we're going to be using auto anyways, skill points is going to be distributed all over the place, right? So getting any sustains that can provide us with healing is going to be fine compared to Luocha as well. And lastly, any support also works. If you're going to be using Blade, then Bronya and Peta will be preferred, but other than that, you can run any supports if you want to. As long as they generate skill points for us, as long as they give us some buffs, especially in full auto, then any support will work. Now moving on to the preservation path. For preservation, it is also very similar with Abundance in a sense where it is the easiest path or one of the easiest paths like Abundance that allows newer players to clear the endgame content because of the sheer amount of survivability you get from the shields as well as the damage you get from Quake, right? So first of all, there is no need for DPS if you are going to be going for preservation path. At the start, you do need DPS, right? You do need DPS to clear the mobs and elites because you don't even have any blessings yet. You don't have any Quake, you don't have any shield, all this kind of stuff. But towards the end, once you obtain your Quake blessing as well as the shields and stack together, any unit can deal tremendous amounts of damage because any unit can just take on all the shields, right? The shields are going to be provided from the blessings, from the Kyros. So that's why we don't really even need a DPS when we're going to be running for preservation. Secondly, it also has high sustain. Just like Abundance, the blessings in this path increase our survivability, such as via defense percentage as well as shield amount, which will greatly help players with less developed things, right? Exactly the same point as Abundance. And the third point is also the same as Abundance, right? It's very auto-friendly because considering that this is a permanent content, being auto-friendly will greatly increase our quality of life when we do Swarm Disaster in the future. So that is the benefits of running preservation. And moving on to how do we exactly run preservation, the key blessings for it is going to be Quake. Quake is an absolute must because without Quake, our damage output will drastically fall off, just like Abundance without Dewdrop, right? Other than that, path blessings that increase shield and defense percentage to increase durability and damage will also be preferred if we're going to be going for preservation. For its support blessings, it's exactly the same as Abundance or honestly any other class, so do refer to the previous slide for the full list. Freeze, action value advance, energy, revive from a killing blow. And lastly, for recommended units, like I said, we don't really need a DPS once we've obtained Quake, so you can honestly just run anybody in that department. But for the sustain units, we do want to have all the shielders, right? Japot is going to be the best shielder because he does provide the most shield out of all the shielders we have, followed by March 7th or Fire MC. At the end of the day, once you get all your preservation buffs, you can honestly run all three shielders, right? Japot, March, and Fire MC. Then the last slot can honestly be anybody that you want, because at that point of time, we have gotten so much shields and so much damage from Quake that it really doesn't matter that much. And lastly, for the supports, it's also the same as Abundance. Any supports work for preservation. So in summary, Storm Disaster is an extremely interactive, challenging and enjoyable content in Honkai Star Rail, which encourages players to go beyond team building and instead make full use of each path's blessings to clear it with greater ease. As mentioned, there is an infinite number of ways to clear difficulty 5 using a combination of team building and blessings or even curios, but for now, Abundance and Preservation provides the players the easiest time to defeat Storm Disaster. With time, the buffs you obtain from completing Trail can greatly improve a player's success chance, so defeating lower difficulties repeatedly also helps us improve our clear rate. We don't really need to rush Storm difficulty 5 if our team is simply not sure enough to do so. The bottom line is think beyond brute forcing a stage, like how you guys want to brute force in MOC 10, right? Just stack on as much damage as possible, because that is not going to work here, right? The amount of health pool they have is absolutely out of this world. There's no way you can one-turn clear any of the swarm bosses, right? So don't brute force your way. Really learn what each path does, right? What Abundance does, what Preservation does, and all the other paths, right? Nihility, the Elation, all that kind of stuff, because they really have a lot of good buffs, and if we know how to make use of these buffs, we can really improve our clear rate without brute forcing, right? And just how they complement each other will be key in clearing difficulty 5. So with that, we have come to the end of today's content. I hope that you guys can learn something from this. Let me know how has the experience been so far, because like I said in my community post earlier, I absolutely love Storm Disaster. I think this direction that MiHoYo is going is absolutely fantastic. Instead of going for MOC, they're pouring a lot of resources into making this kind of simulated roguelike game mode the end game, and I really love it, right? So if you guys would like to engage in further discussions, feel free to hop onto my Discord, Poki's Village, where we have a very active community talking about Star Rail every single day. And if you guys would like to catch my stream, I'm particularly active the next couple of days, or rather the next couple of weeks, because I do want to stream Storm Disaster, right? So that's going to be at twitch.tv/MrPoki. Schedule will be posted in Discord. And with that, we've come to the end of today's content, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.